Good evening and welcome to tonight's Monday Live. Sadly, you have just myself this evening. I was going to get Jasper on, but someone went and booked him for a driver fitting, so I'm all on my lonesome this evening. So I note the first question about a swing key for Stuart. I'm not sure that I'm qualified to talk about the right forefinger, but I might give it a go anyway. So I hope you've had a great week. Season's just starting to bed in now. A couple of live players coming back. Brooks Koepka, first week on tour back at Torrey Pines. Justin Rose, what a wonderful, wonderful performance. I mean, that really is, he's evergreen. I mean, that to age 45, same good age as myself, to be performing that way, to be looking after his body that way, to dominate that way, I mean, unbelievable performance. And I think he's certainly going to be a kind of hot player coming into this year with the major season approaching. I think he's certainly one to look out for, and just a fantastic performance. Weather in California looked horrid, didn't it? I feel so sad for them playing in that. The girls unfortunately got Florida. Now you'd think Florida would be pretty good, but the last round got cancelled because they couldn't even complete it today. But Nelly Corda come back to the winning circle. So, you know, a player who's been a little bit, you know, out in the wilderness. You know, absolute class, a wonderful, beautiful, beautiful swing. And that class is always going to come back to the fore, and getting over the line with a great 64 and some really tough conditions on Saturday to get to the top of the leaderboard. Lottie Woe, you know, close by as well, so some great interest for the Brits of us out there. And then rather interesting results in the UAE in Bahrain. Playoff, Callum Hill in a playoff with an out of bounds and then a shank into the water. Poor chap to not win, but Garcia up there, Patrick Reed up there again. He's really just showing consistency of form. I think we're going to see a lot of players, some newer players up in the winner's circle this year, but some old stagers in the likes of Rose and Reed and Garcia showing their presence as well. So quite an interesting week on tour, and we've got the waste management this week, which a couple of years ago was the wasted management, and hopefully this year be back to the fun and games that we see at TBC Scottsdale, that stadium hole. It's always a fun tournament, so hopefully we'll get to see that again this year. So having covered all that, very, very busy week in the studio here, actually. We're just really starting to kick off with all the products coming in. Cobra drivers actually landed today. So as per one of the questions that's come through, yes, I can test those. But we've now pretty much got everything in that's going to come in. A few left-handed options still to come in. But yeah, this really, February is the start of silly season, which we are officially in now. So, but going into questions now. So start with Simon Caulfield. Simon, thank you for that question. So the grip question is, can we talk about the position and role of the right forefinger? I feel mine manipulates the face sometimes too much. So in terms of that hand position, I'll give you my take on it. I think, so you're either a player that doesn't use the hands much or does. I'm a hands-based player. So I like to get my grip into the crook of the finger here, that right little digit down the bottom there. So I like to sit it into the finger. And I think position-wise, for me, it should rest just underneath. So literally kind of rest the hand on and sit it into the crook of that finger. If it starts to get too high up, I'm going to come back to the camera there, if it starts to get into that part of the hand, rather than into the crook of the finger there, then actually you end up having to close the thumb around it a little bit more. If it gets into the finger there, the thumb can sit nicely on top. I hope that's all in view. But if you get it into the right bit of the finger, you don't have to exert a lot of pressure. And then that hand can just stay nice and stable on the back there. I think if you feel like that bottom hand is having a little too much influence, it could be a grip pressure thing. It might be something just to potentially look at the tapering of the grip as well from a size point of view. But ultimately, if you're someone like me who has a little bit of a drop, and as I start down, the club opens up, I actually use that hand to square through. So you need to get it into the crook of your fingers. But if you can keep that grip pressure light, it shouldn't over-influence the shot shape. If it gets hard grip pressure, muscles tighten up, and then you can make quite a strong movement on it. So I like to see a lighter grip pressure, but I like it into the crook of the fingers now. So Stuart, from a technique point of view, rather than just me from a playing standpoint, may have a very different answer. But I think grip pressure is always a key to overworking something, and the lighter your grip pressure, the less influence that can have. So that should soften it off a little bit. And then the secondary part, which I will get onto now, can you hit the Elite Triple Diamond versus the Quantum Triple Diamond? How do they compare on launch and spin? So one of the things that we have most definitely seen from the Quantum range this year is a bit of a flatter launch. So Callaway in the past have always been really reliable for keeping spin down, but actually allowing you to see a little bit more launch angle. So if ever we've wanted to increase launch height but not pop a spin up, the Callaways have been an absolute go-to. So I've got 9-degree heads in both models here. And this is actually something the Triple Diamond Max is an incredibly strong flighted head relative to where those heads have been in the past. Almost to the point where I don't know how many of the Triple Diamonds are actually going to do because it's that lower launch and spin off the Triple Diamond Max. But I'm going to start with the Elite Triple Diamond. So hopefully you got that one, because that was hit really well. Yes. It's missed the spin read. I'll have to do another one. But reasonable bit of launch. So 15 degrees of launch, and this is just the 9-degree in its standard position. So I do create a little bit of additional loft. But I can really feel that kick it up and out. So say 15 launch, 2-1 on spin. So it's a real up and over ball flight. And that's something that realistically has been a trait from Callaway over the years. If anything, the Elite Triple Diamond, I would say was probably, was a little bit safer than many. And by that I mean that it wasn't quite as hot on flight. So Paradigm Triple Diamond was definitely a little flatter on flight, a little bit lower on spin. And so it's almost like in the Elite series, it's almost like it went to being more of a max in terms of the flight profile, but it was definitely a safer shot. So in the, I was about to call it AI smoke based on the look. The Quantum Triple Diamond, what we'll see here, I mean, actually visually looks a little bit less loft as well. You don't see as much of the face. I pulled that over a little bit. Let me give it that one more. The one thing, the face on these do feel a lot more solid. Yeah, that's a representative one. So you can see there, that launch and spin is an absolute nosedive. So, 12.5 launch, 1400 spin. So we've gone from angle of attack 3.5, 3.8. So I've hit up on it 0.4 of a degree more. But instead of 15 launch and 2-1, that has now come out at, okay, drew it a little bit more, but 12.5 launch, 1500 revs on spin. I mean, for an exceptionally high speed player, or someone who really spins the bejesus out of it, this is going to be a great head. But for a lot of players, that's just way too little spin. So yes, we might end up then going to a 10.5 versus the 9 that we may have done in the past. But yeah, there's not a lot of flight and spin on that. So unless you're getting that ball flight really high, and you can use this to bring that flight down hard, it might end up being a little bit volatile for a lot of players, I think, from a spin and therefore carry distance point of view. But I don't think I've rarely ever seen a head lower spin than that, maybe SLDR years back, but that's a real knuckle flight. So be careful with those. The old loft up marketing phrase might be back in for the Triple Diamond of the Quantum. Sean Cullen, hi Simon, love the show. First time watching live. Thank you very much for joining us. What are thoughts on the HL irons, and can we compare the ZXi RHL and the 925 Hot Metal HL? So I think there's something that we really, really need. I think iron lofts have got mad. I actually did a PXG XP iron for someone this afternoon. The 6 iron, its standard loft is 23. That's my 4 iron. But actually what we're doing is we're adding a bit of loft to it, making it in line with his 5 iron, and it's going to be a 5 iron. But the head's lighter because their standard length is longer. It's got loads of tech. The performance is great, but he's going to have 2 6 irons in the bag. So what that actually means is for a lot of players is they're actually too low at spin. Some of these heads, there's so much weight at the bottom, they gear spin off, they're forgiving and they're good on ball speed, but it brings the spin down. So actually the high launch irons are really bringing a forgiving head and just putting some loft on. Now, something we've been calling out for a number of years, really very, very helpful to have these heads, but getting a forgiving head that retains flight until very recently, been quite tough. I'm just going to grab those two heads in my shaft. So it'll be 2 moments. There we go. Whilst I'm grabbing the ZXi RHL. Right, so both of these heads have, you know, fairly wide sole, a little bit of camber off on the back edge. So in terms of bounce, there's not a huge amount of bounce because that helps the head work through underneath and flight it up. They're both plenty of weight at the bottom, both got reasonable bit of offset. In theory, that helps the head come through underneath and give it a little bit more flight. We've had great results with the Mizuno head. So, you know, certainly something that has been very, very successful, and the previous model was as well. But, you know, certainly got a bit of a rival in the ZXi R. So, Mizuno head here. So what we get, I'm going to add a couple of numbers on the screen here. So I'm going to add in land angle and height. So 16.5 launch is for me at 88. So it's not really designed for my club speed, but still going to give it an impression of it. So 16.5 launch, 5.1 on spin, 96 feet, land angle 47. So plenty of height and spin and stopping power on that. If I switch it over to the Srixon, now certainly the ZXi R standard model is an absolute rocket ship. It goes absolutely miles. So having this higher launch version was a really key one for them to add in. So very similar looking head, maybe a bit of a flatter top line, 88, so thinned it. Let me do one more. That is not going to give us representative data. So we can probably see how high that launched. I'm going to just take the one out from the middle that was the thinned one. So you launch angle wise 19, spin at 4.3. The Mizuno didn't launch as high, but spun more. So what the Srixon's doing is really launching it high, but it's higher launch and lower spin. You know, angle of attack minus 3.8 on that, and minus 3.6. Sorry, on the Srixon, and minus 3.8 on the Mizuno. So Srixon's got 2.5 degrees more launch, but it's got 600 revs, 700 revs less spin. But land angle 47, height 99 feet. The Mizuno, she had a little bit more ball speed. So the Mizuno actually peak height ball speed to ball speed will be a little bit lower, but it's got more spin, lower launch. So if you're looking for pure launch angle height, the Srixon looks like it does it a little bit better. If you're looking for a bit more additional spin, then there's the Mizuno. And that would be really the best comparison I can give you. Both get height and land angle up in a good way. But if you're looking for spin, play the Mizuno. If you're just looking launch angle, Srixon does it a little bit better. The Yorkshire Blade. Hi Simon, great to be with you as always. Thoughts on Cobra and PXG drivers? If you have them, can you hit them? The answer is yes. So PXG, I mean the Cobra's literally just come in today. The PXG heads, what I've noticed with them, they are good this year, but I feel like the strike point is a little bit more toe side. The sweet spot is slightly more towards the toe on those heads. I actually talked to Mike Nicolette in Orlando week before last about them and asked whether it was actually an actual design strategy to move CG out to the toe a little bit. My miss is a bit heel side, so I have to really feel like I strike the toe side on the head to get the sweet spot. And he just said, no, it sounds like a bit of a you problem, which is absolutely true. But I think they haven't been engineered to have a sweet spot that side, but definitely if you're a toe striker, they could be a very good option. Cobra just all round seem to be very, very stable. I'm going to compare the X in the Cobra and I'll get the Lightning, the kind of standard core model head, just as a quick comparison. More mid. Ooh. So I'm going to compare the Tour Mid and the Core models because they're about the most similar. So let's swap these out. Just in order to make this one work, I'm just going to pop the screw out the Cobra. Right. There we go. So got the 10.5 in both that I'm going to loft down. Just turn the loft down on each of these just to get them closer to my loft spec. Now I think brand-wise, I think Cobra have innovated more than they're given credit for over the years. And actually talking to Jose Miraflores about, who's one of the lead designers about this design, the way they go about their designs and thinking about the X and Y axis, the Z axis, they just seem to get there earlier than other brands. And from our very brief initial testing with these, I actually feel we were all very, very positive about them when we first hit them. And I think, you know, the shape's nice and neutral. You know, some aren't going to like the gloss finish on the crown, but it's a very, very square face, very straight face. So a little less bulge might make it a bit easier to line up. But I think the Cobra driver from that initial hit was very, very stable. So nice, solid feeling head. And quite a strong flight. Give that one more there. But this has got the heavier weight at the front, so it is in the lower spin position. I think something that seems to be a bit of a trend this year, a bit more launch, is how much lower spin some of the heads seem to be this year. So, you know, 15 and 2000, this head is producing similar flight to that Elite Triple Diamond, which is quite strong. But certainly, you know, spin stability very good. Lost a little bit of ball speed, got that a bit higher at the face. But the previous hit, you know, strong ball speed, but, you know, low spin. And that's something that, as I say, little bit of a trend this year that we're seeing. Do the same thing with the PXG. Yeah, I think it's one of those years where I think we'll be at the Cobra heads, you know, something like the GTs are fairly strong on spin, the Calis are strong on spin, TaylorMade are never weak on spin. I think if you're looking for a lower spin head, this year is definitely a strong year for that. So a little bit of a rounder head shape on the PXG. Again, quite a flat, square face. It's a very distinctive sound, a bit more of a clank. Again, strong on spin, maybe not quite as low a flight as that Cobra head proportionally, but in a similar kind of ballpark. I think what you're getting out of some of these heads now, I'll do one more, this is a kind of more of a tour style flight. There we go. More of a tour style flight from a spin point of view, yeah, 1800, but with a little bit more stability. So, so actually, I think we're going to see more players going up a degree in loft over what they're used to in order to get a bit of spin onto them. But then that does mean it's sort of upper mid launch, lower mid spin, and actually potentially very efficient distance. So yeah, from a feel point of view, the PXG is a bit of a harsher sound. The Cobra is a little bit more dampened down. For my own preference, a little bit of a nicer sound. But in terms of performance and across the face performance stability, particularly if you're a toe striker, PXGs have been very strong. So some good drivers out this year, that's for certain. Pro V1, they've done a load of hitting. I'm now going to go through some questions. Pro V1 David, can you explain what are the effects of counterweighting your putter? So counterweighting is putting a back weight in. So essentially putting a weight in the top of the grip end. So you're adding 20, 25, 50, in some instances grams to the grip end. So what that does is it adds weight to the club, but it pulls the mass up into the grip. So you're focusing more of the weight in the grip end, which reduces swing weight, adds dead weight. So for me, I putt with a little bit of lead lag, so I swing the head. For me, it's the worst thing I can do because I actually lose the feel for the bit of the club that I regulate the pace with and regulate my stroke with. So same with full swing clubs. I play with a little bit of head weight. But you take someone like a Porrick Harrington, he very much moves the handle rather than swings the head. So it's much more of a fixed action and shoulders back and through and dead hands and arms. Whereas Lauren Roberts, Brad Faxon, some of the old school Ben Crenshaw, they very much swung the head and had more of a rotation. So if you're someone who wants to maybe take a bit of hands out or try and minimize any kind of flipping kind of feel, if you're someone who moves the handle back and through, then that back weighting can be a good thing because it's the bit your hands are on. But if you're someone who relies on swinging the club head, then it's literally the worst thing you can do. So it's something that is a real, it's either a really good thing to do or it's an awful thing to do, and there isn't really an in-between. So I think it's work out which one you are. If you've got one of the super stroke grips, for example, where you can put a counterweight in and take it out easily, you can have a bit of a play around and test it out. But if you don't, then very much work on, focus on swinging the head, focus on keeping your dead hands and moving the handle and having less of that kind of head swing and see which one gives you better results. That way you know whether it's likely to be a good thing or a bad thing. That's a good way to test. The Idle Mouse 1394. That's new. I don't think we've seen you before. Thank you very much for joining us. What are thoughts on, asked before about the Ping IDI 3-iron, as I keep blocking it. I'm looking to come for a fitting in the next couple of months. Would you fit me in a new shaft in the existing head? Certainly something we can do for sure. With the Ping clubs, because you've got the weight in the toe, there's plenty that we can do to figure out what's creating that block, and then whether it's a change in shaft, whether it's just a change in balance, change in grip, we'll be able to test that out for you. So yeah, it certainly is a head. It's a strong head. Good ball speed performance, nice strong flight. But with our test one that we've got in the rack, we can switch shafts in and out and isolate dead weight, balance point, shaft type, profile, to see what it is that's causing the block, and then we can certainly refit that head to you, no problem at all. Look forward to seeing you. Joey D 2920, what are thoughts on the Hazardous Smoke Black Gen 5? Can you compare it to any other shaft, Ventus? So the Black Series Hazardous have always been a tip stable, designed for lower spin. But what's happened over the years, you go back to the original Hazardous Black, and that was very tip weighted. And it was a real kind of heavy hitters shaft. Over the models, it's become much more even weighted, almost sort of marginally on the towards the higher balance point side of things. So, but ultimately, it's still a structurally stable, tip stiff, lower spin, mid to low launching shaft. So if you were to put it into sort of Ventus parlance, it's kind of like it's more akin to a Ventus Blue. Maybe not quite Ventus Black, but it's more Ventus Blue in terms of tip stiffness and profile historically. But it's a shaft that has been used generation after generation after generation in stock shafts. So it's something that a lot of brands over the years have used. And yeah, from a spin point of view, tends to keep spin down. I'm going to go through a few questions. If I've got time at the back end, I'll hit it against another one. I've just done a load of hitting. I just want to get through a few questions. But if I've got time at the back end, I'll give it a hit. J Farabee 77, good morning from the US. Good morning. Recently fit into an EC1. That's one of the Aratera shafts. Can you explain the differences in feel and balance between the three Aratera shafts? Love the content. Well done. Thank you very much. So, well, there are two models of shaft. There's the EC1. There was one very, very early one, a prototype that wasn't really launched. There's the EC1 and there's the ACO, which is the most recent one. So essentially the EC1 in the blue and the gray, the only real difference is in the tip section. So the tip is stiffer in the EC1 gray than the blue. The gray swings a little bit more tip heavy and feels a little bit more stout. They're very, very similar dead weights. And so in principle, it's just the launch and the spin profile between those two models. In the ACO, I think I've got AC1, ACO, AO2 series, which is their most recent launch, it's just come out. They've construction-wise done a little bit of a difference in terms of the materials used all the way through the shaft and how they're layered. So they've always been a little different in terms of having linear core and bias core, kind of one layer, one layer, one layer, one layer, rather than a bank of 4 or 5 layers of one way and then a set of layers on top of the other way, which essentially by interweaving the layers, you get a smoother, more consistent material. It's more consistent through the shaft rather than the inner core and an outer layer. But in terms of energy transfer, seems to be a little bit more efficient. Now, what we've seen from the AO2 is we've actually seen a little bit more club speed coming from these shafts. And it's when Matt and I first tested them, we saw a couple of miles an hour each, and actually it's something we have seen in the fitting bays with clients coming in as well. So that one in particular does seem to be generating just a little bit more club speed in terms of how it's storing energy, loading, unloading through the swing. You know, it just does seem to be that little bit more efficient. And there's no dissipation of energy through the shaft by all accounts, assuming this is exactly what's happening. But we are seeing consistently slightly higher club speeds out of it. And then they have the blue and the grey in that model as well. So you've got the EC1 blue and grey and the AO2 blue and grey, and they both have the same. The blues are more of a mid-launch, mid-spin, and the grey is a lower launch, slightly lower launch and spin, but it's just the tip section in both shafts that's different. So the button, the grip section, the button, the mid section stays the same, and then it's just tip stability that changes that flight profile. And in both of them, the grey swing just a little bit more tip heavy. I hope that answers the question, but really, really interesting shafts. Tockley 31, KBS dollar taper light 95 shaft for 85 mile an hour, 7-iron swing speed, regular flex. I'm assuming that's a question of is that combination a relevant option? I mean, ultimately, 85 miles an hour for a 7-iron isn't weak. That's actually a reasonable bit of club speed. That means 6-iron is going to be 87 or so, which is actually getting up there. Anything, obviously, kind of, you'd probably say high speed is 90 miles an hour plus. Mid speed, 80 to 90, and underneath 80, more on the kind of the lower moderate side. So actually, as a shaft, you might, if you were fitting based on swing speed, which we don't, it's more about how you load and how you move, and does the shaft marry up to you in terms of movement, you might be more inclined to go stiff flex at that speed. However, ultimately, it's just what shaft swings right. In the dollar taper light, the stiff flex will go heavier. So that might not swing as well in the 100-gram weight. So if the 95 weight times better, that will give you better results, because the difference between reg and stiff is so small. It's a couple of % of the bend of the shaft. So that on its own won't make the difference, just does that weight of shaft time better for you. So ultimately, the only way to answer that is hit them both and see which one swings better. I'm afraid I can't actually tell you which one's right for you or not. Paul Dunn 5712, Simon, can we get your early thoughts on the T250 Star, the high launch edition? Might we see more brands go back to more conventional lofts? To the latter part of the question, I hope so, particularly, and so it's really in the forgiving heads. You've got, take Titleist range, T100, 6-irons at 29 degrees, 150, 28, and the CB and the MBs are 30 odd degrees of standard loft. So I would, going way back, say 31 degrees was standard loft for a 6-iron, but go further back, 25, 30 years back, it was 32, 33. Now, for a lot of players, higher launch, especially at lower speed, higher launch is really important to get the ball up and carrying and get consistent carry distance. Because it doesn't matter what it does when it lands, if it's running out, that's not helpful at all. So what we have seen out of the 250 Stars is definitely more spin and definitely more launch. I mean, it's got more loft, but a surprising amount more spin out of that head than the standard T250. So yes, the loft is different, but even comparing, for example, where you might expect the T250 7-iron, standard model 7-iron versus the 250 Star, the spin proportion is definitely higher out the start. So it has been very successful. If we're being really picky, the only shame is that the head weights are lighter. So actually they've dropped about 5 or 6 grams on the standard head weight as well. really because it's designed around lower club speeds, trying to help get more speed, but actually how useful it is for players who don't need a lighter head weight as well. It would actually be quite nice to have that heavier head, the standard head weight back to it too. But might we see more brands go back to more conventional lofts? I think we are starting to see that. Things like the ZXIR HL, 925 HL. There are more heads doing that high launch kind of model, but in the forgiving heads where we need margin of error, it's really critical to get more loft on. So I'm hoping we'll see more and more. There was a couple of allusions to that a couple of weeks back at the show, so I'm hoping that that bears fruit because we really need them, quite frankly. Polo 1928. When you hit the new Cobra, can you hit the new LS Model 2? I'll give that a quick hit now, just as a comparison. It's actually almost sort of mildly scary seeing how low a spin we're getting out of these, because there are lots of players that do need lower spin, but the amount that the spin's coming down that we're seeing, I'm not sure we need it this low spin. Certainly the tour players definitely don't need this amount of low spin. So, or not many of them. So we're seeing a lot of the tour players playing the core model, to get this screw out, playing the core model heads, which you go back a few models, just trying to pop this out so I can put our adapter in, which a few models ago, 5, 6 years back, you'd have never seen as many using the, in inverted commas, standard model head versus the low spin versus the kind of the tour head would have been what it would have been called years back. Get this screw out. There we go. There we go. Get the little. We don't want that bit of rubber to get stuck in the head, that's for sure. So yeah, I mean, it's funny. It goes in phases, but yeah, this series does appear to be an exceptionally low spin series. So across the board from all the brands. I think what we are starting to see is in the low spin heads, just more margin of error as well. So it's a very, very stable feeling head. Yeah, ironically, is it more, is it lower spin? Not necessarily. It's a very nice, strong flight, and one of the more solid feeling heads out there. There you go. So get it. I think this is where strike point comes in. If you get it slightly high, slightly toe side, that's down at 1600 revs again. So, yeah, I currently play a TSR 3 8 degree head lofted up a little bit. I've never ever needed as much loft as I think if I were moving into a head this year. Seriously, would have to contemplate, do I go 10.5 and turn it down, which almost feels wrong for having played an 8 and 8.5 degree head for my whole playing life. But that's too little spin. And if I ramp it up, I might get 108, 109. I might creep a little bit more spin onto it. But the amount of heads this year that, for me, are almost coming out too low, it's more than I've ever seen before. So if you're a high spinner, this is a great year for driver for you. Sully said 3266. What driver is this? I'm not sure which one Oh, triple. Okay, yeah, it was the Elite Triple Diamond versus the Quantum Triple Diamond. Tony, by the way, good evening, Simon. Thoughts on the new drivers that have a weight forward option? Similar to yourself, weight back is bad for me. And what Tony means by that is if I have weight back, I tend to open it and then my first miss is big time right. So weight forward head, but like that LS, I can manage the face a little bit more easily. What's your favorite for performance and feel, and can you hit it, please? Well, actually, of the current crop from a feel point of view, that Cobra head is a fantastic feeling head. It's solid, stable, it's got a little bit of pop sound-wise off the face. I actually really like the stability across it and the more compact size. So I think actually there are a lot of boxes ticked out of that. I think if I were to be trying to dial one in for me, I'd be having to really kind of play around with the loft to get that in a window where the carry's a little bit safer. You partly, I could change golf ball, add a few hundred revs of spin, but I don't want to do that for my irons. So I'd have to be looking at lofts. But actually, from a feel point of view, I really like that Cobra. The TaylorMade's solid as well. I think the Callaway with the layering on the face, there are a lot more solid feeling heads this year. With the layering to Callaway's face, you can lose a little bit of sensation where you struck it, but there's a lot of guts behind the contact, which I don't think they've had for a while. So I think, but yeah, from an all-around point of view, I like the LS Cobra. Plan to come and see you, but we'll wait for the Titleist. Your Titleist fan, well, yeah, wait to compare them. Yeah, they're likely to be, as I understand it, July, August. I know they're looking to bring it forward a little bit this year, but yeah, we'll see what they have to offer a bit later. I think the seeding is going to start seeing in tour players' hands around the Masters, as I understand. Golf Nerd 3, what are the most common causes of toe strikes you've seen in the fitting bay? A lot of the time, it's actually someone having a little bit of a stand up. So if you get a little bit, pop that down. If from a swing point of view, you get a little bit, kind of over the top, then actually, in order not to drive it straight into the ground, to move low point forward, someone has to stand up. And what that does is it actually starts to bring the club closer to you, and then we see the toe strike. So it's often, if you're in to out, that's when the shank happens. But if you're a little over the top and then you're standing up on it to not fat it, that's when the toe strike tends to happen. Either that or it's just an arm swing. So again, the arms get a little bit kind of across and narrow, and there's no real width and rotation extension. So, but it's normally one of those two we see most often in the fitting bay. Tony, PS my Mizuno M15s are simply awesome. Thanks to you and Tom for the fitting and the dial-in sessions. So Tony got a set of M15s from Japan a little sooner than we had them in. And the 15s, I think the 15s are a stunningly good looking head. They're actually a stronger flight than I thought they'd be, I must say. The spin and flights come down a little bit versus the 245 for me testing them, but I think feels fantastic and the ball speed's really good. So they are, I agree, I think they're a lovely, lovely head. And I think we could do quite a few of those this year. Jim Hartwell, hi Simon, hi Jim. Can't choose between KBS Tour 120 and DG Mid 115 paired with the Mizuno 241s for a 90-mile-an-hour swing. Gives me very similar results, so any pearls of wisdom. So the balance point of the shaft's different. So from a flight spin point of view, there's any kind of 3 to 5 grams difference. But if you're someone who tends to get a little bit more aggressive and pull against it, we'll be using the dynamic gold mid to put the balance point down the bottom of the shaft a little bit more. So if you're someone who needs the club to get a little bit more of a kind of a later hit and to kind of pull against and hit against the bottom end, the dynamic gold mids will give you that. The KBS Tour, the balance point is failing to multitask miserably. So the balance point, the dynamic gold mid is more down the bottom end, and on the KBS Tour is more in the middle. So if you're someone who's a little bit more of a body rotation player and quieter hands, then the KBS Tour is likely to give you a little bit more consistency. If you're someone who's a little bit more aggressive down the bottom and hits against the club head end a bit more, dynamic gold mid will give you a bit more to hit against. And that's really differentiation between the two. That balance point does shift a little bit, and almost the more aggressive you are, the chances of the dynamic gold mid is more likely to give you a little bit more consistency of strike, and the more kind of quiet hands you are, more body turn, KBS Tour. That would be the way I would look at the two. Tom Middlehurst, hi Simon, thanks for the fitting today. It's great to see you as always. Look forward to moving to the Callaway and keeping that spin down. So as we were saying, Tom, who was in earlier on, moving into the Triple Diamond Max, which allowed us to just manage the face, to get the face coming through a little squarer by having the weight slightly further forward, but using the 10.5 degree, keeping spin down a little bit more. So exceptionally efficient for that, and really good consistency of spin as well. So it was a good result on that all round, but thank you, Tom. Nick KSO, thoughts on the React shafts for the QI4D drivers? Is their methodology of matching shaft rotation rate consistent with what you see in driver fittings? Now, this is a very interesting one. I chatted to Mitsubishi week before last because I wanted, before I made any kind of comments, and I actually slightly glossed over the shafts when we did the preview on this, because I wanted to get Mitsubishi's point of view first, because the way that TaylorMade are explaining it isn't that clear. So for me, the principle would be the more high rotation you are, the less rotation from the shaft you want. Because if you think about it, you know, if you've got a swing where there's a lot of rotation going on and you strike it out the heel or the toe, there's already a lot of twist going on. The last thing you want is the shaft exaggerating that. So my question to Mitsubishi was, and ironically they had the same question back to me, is that how did I interpret the shafts? And I said to them, well, that was the same thing I was going to ask you in terms of, are the low rotation shafts actually the, you know, in traditional terms, stiffer tip, lower torque style shafts and suiting a stronger player with high rotation? Or are they a, let me make this make sense, because even me trying to explain it, it comes out a little bit arse about face. So I would say that a high rotation player would want a low rotation shaft, but are they labeled low rotation for a low torque stiffer tip shaft, or are they a little higher rotation for a low rotation player? So, and the answer is, I don't know, because they haven't really clarified it. The specs would suggest that the LR shafts are in the heavier weights and the stiffer flexes more than the HR shafts. But to me, from a fitting point of view, I wouldn't put a high rotation shaft with a high rotation player. As I understand it, the high rotation shaft is a softer tip, higher torque, but a more softer tip shaft. Essentially, it's soft tip, mid tip, stiff tip in terms of high rotation, mid rotation, low rotation. But I wonder whether there's a little bit of confusion out there, because talking to Mitsubishi, they agreed with me, and talking to other fitters, we all agree that the messaging isn't particularly clear on what exactly those shafts are doing, and are you trying to kind of cross match and go low rotation for a high rotation player, or have they already done that so it's not very clear. That's a very long-winded way of saying it's not very clear at all. And anyone I know that knows shafts says it doesn't make sense. Now, I think I like the concept of it, but I think what they're trying to do is make it easier to put something right. You swing this way, and there is some absolute methodology to how much rotation you put in and how you want the shaft to respond. But I'm not sure they're explaining it very well. So, yeah. I don't know whether they're actually fitting shafts the way that club fitters would fit shafts, or whether whether something's got the wrong way. Yeah, it's a bit confused, and no one I know can explain it to me the way I would like it. So we have asked the question to them to clarify it, and we're waiting to get an answer back, but it's not that clear. I think what's going to happen is a lot of people are going to get put in the mid-rotation shaft, because I just think that's the safer bet, but we shall see. But to me, yeah, doesn't make sense. Anthony Ped, playoff +3 with club speed of around 105 miles an hour and looking at a utility iron, maybe the Mizuno Pro, but unsure if to go graphite or steel. What's the pros and cons for both? So I've always had to play a steel shaft in my driving iron, because it depends how you swing it is the first point. It might sound a little bit strange, but bear with me. If you play it literally as an extension off your irons, then the chances are that a similar shaft, if you're in steel in your irons, a similar steel shaft is likely to work best. If it's more of a blat it off a tee and it's almost taking it more towards a hybrid or a wood swing, but with an iron head on the bottom, then a graphite. So, for example, I'll get my 2-iron out for this. So, if I'm using this as literally just a kind of a send it off a tee club, and all I'm trying to do is whip through it, create a load of speed and fire it down a fairway, then the lighter shaft actually makes it a little bit easier for me to rotate through and create that speed. But if the way I'm using it is for that, but I'm also playing it on a links course and playing it on the fairway, I'm actually looking to play shots with it. So actually having a bit more mass that I can kind of drive down, play it more like a mid-iron, where it actually gives me a bit more to kind of hit against. And actually there's a little bit more guts to the contact there. It's gone the same distance, but that second one I'm driving on top of it and squeezing it rather than whipping through and flighting it. That generally be the way that I would differentiate between going either lighter in steel or into a composite, because that lighter weight is going to make it easier to create a little bit more speed. But if I go lighter, I lose the timing. So there's a little bit of try each option and see which one gives you the best quality of strike. But generally speaking, that would be the differentiation for me that I would look for. Wayne Kendrick, evening, I use a Paradigm triple diamond with graphite design AD UB6X. Swing speed 110 to 115, lose it right more often than not. Any ideas if that setup is good for that swing speed? So again, doesn't really work in terms of swing speed, it's more about how you build your speed. Now, the only thing you haven't told me is what length and what swing weight it is. So the triple diamond is a slightly fade bias head, it sits a little bit open. The UB, so the shaft, the UB is more of a kind of a mid-launch but a mid to low spin. It's kind of a slightly stiffer version of a DI, essentially. So, but the balance point sits lower mid. So if your driver is, for example, 45.5 inches in D5, chances are that that's part of the reason it's getting away from you right. If it's 44.5 inches in D0, it's probably not that. But ultimately, yeah, the club as a general setup, in principle, absolutely works for that swing speed. But it depends who's swinging it as to whether it's the right setup or not. And as frustrating as it probably is to hear me say that over and over again on some of these questions, I just genuinely can't give you a definitive answer on that. But get the length and the swing weight checked, and if it's over 45 inches, if it's up at D5, D6, then get that length trimmed down a little bit, because the longer it is, the more likely that club, if you're generating a lot of snap and speed, the more likely it is to do that and get underneath and open for you. If it's a little bit shorter, it's that much easier to get that toe through and squared off. So if you can get that length down, get that swing rate down a little bit, if it's long and heavy, that should give you your answer as to whether it's set up or whether it's the actual shaft selection, head selection itself, or whether it's just the way it's built. But the right head and shaft built the wrong way won't work. And ultimately the build is so key, as important, one could argue, if not more important than the fit, because a good fit is nothing without a good build. Golf Nerd 3, have you seen any players that have more active hands with bigger grips? I actually feel like I can keep my hands more passive with smaller grips. I mean, again, it's sometimes what can happen if you go big on the grip, then actually you've actually then got to work harder to rotate. And so actually there's a very interesting talk based on gears by a chap called Jonathan, who James and I met on the Sunday playing golf, and he's got a studio just outside of Paris and was doing some research on grip size. And actually, for some players, the bigger size created more rotation. So again, this is very much a case-by-case thing. If for some players, a smaller grip can quieten the hands down. If it sits in the right bit of your hand and allows you to move freely, then it can quieten that off. For others, a small grip means it moves around your hands and it can create all sorts of ills. So ultimately, again, if you've got, we can air blast grips on and off during the fit, so we can test that theory. But it's something that can be quite hard to test out. But ultimately, if it's comfortable, number one, that's a key thing. And in principle, if it fits your hands, that's another key thing to look at. But equally speaking, big can create more flip, small can create more flip, and vice versa. So make sure that it's just working for you. If you're a strong body rotation player, you can generally get away with playing a slightly bigger grip. If you're someone who uses your hands more to square the face, then a smaller grip, getting into the crook of the fingers tends to help a little bit more. But unfortunately, with golf, it's both can do both. It's just relative to the player. Previon David can explain the difference between the Titleist GT1, GT2 driver and fairway wood. So GT1 is designed for higher launch. So it's a lighter frame weight head. That's one of the key things to say about it. So GT1 ultimately started off as something designed for lower club speeds. So whether you say juniors, seniors, ladies, where actually lighter head to help generate a bit more speed in principle, but also designed to get the ball up in the air a bit quicker relative to loft. So you can, if you put the +6 gram weight in the back, you can actually get the head pretty close to the GT2 standard weight, but you're dragging weight low and back, so it's creating even more flight. Whereas the GT2 has got split weight, so it's got some weight at the front and then got some weight at the back. So the GT2 this series, or the 2 series this series, is noticeably stronger in launch and spin than previous models have been in the past. I think this is why we're seeing someone like Ludwig Oberg not getting it consistently in the bag. His TSR has stayed in the bag because it actually spins a little bit more. So go back to what we were saying about the drivers earlier, they're getting lower spin. So some of the tour players are actually staying in older models to keep some of that spin rate in. You know, Justin Rose in the AI Smoke series, Ludwig in the TSR. We're seeing that is a fairly repetitive QI10. Scotty Scheffler going back into QI10 currently. So it's about managing flight and spin, and so the GT2 is quite a strong flight, and certainly in driver, GT1 definitely kicks it up a little higher and is a bit lighter. Fairway woods, again, GT1's a little bit lighter, but it's a bit of a bigger footprint in the fairway woods, so slightly deeper head, but lighter crown, so the weight still sits low, but the GT1s actually measure a bit more loft than stated loft. So the 15 in the GT1 is more like a 16.5 degree loft. So it launches higher. Partly it's designed to, but partly because it's got more loft on. But in the GT1, you've got weight front and back, so you can bring the spin down a little bit or keep the spin up a little bit, so you can manage the flight a bit more than you can in GT2. But GT2, I'd say, both suit someone who picks it a little bit more, but GT1 will launch it a bit higher. GT2 is a bit lower launch and a bit lower spin, but still quite moderate on spin compared to a lot of other fairway wood heads. But the bigger head shape, particularly in GT1, was to look a little bit more forgiving. Mike T, message retracted. I hope that's because I'd answered it already. John Osborne, hi Simon, need your help. I spin my driver really low, even in a max head. I play off 2, and as a result of my low spin, I play a 12-degree head and have a swing speed of 110 miles an hour. What's the cause of spinning at low? Assume it's technique. Can you help? Well, low spin isn't necessarily bad technique. It's just some players, take Stuart. Stuart delivers a very strong loft. I add loft. So he's an 11-degree head, I'm in an 8-degree head. So it's not necessarily a negative thing. It's just that you might get into a de-lofted position into impact. It doesn't necessarily mean you're smothering it over. If you're hitting it low and straight, it's a square face, you just don't deliver a lot of loft. So that, looking at the heads we just talked about on GT1, that might be a really good head for you to generate a little bit more launch angle relative to loft. But this year in particular, we're seeing less heads that do that. So, there aren't that many heads that add a bit of launch and add a bit of spin, but potentially GT1 could be a great option for you. So you've got plenty of speed, so you can actually probably do quite well, depending on how low your flight is. At 110 mile an hour club speed, you can get a decent bit of carry, but head style is going to be critical for you. And say GT1, potentially a very good option. And some of the previous model Callaways have also, like the Elite, standard Elite model in a 12-degree, again, it's all about, you can have a head that measures 15, but if you take 5 degrees off it, you're still delivering 10 degrees of loft. You can have an 8-degree loft head, add 5 degrees, and you're delivering 13. So the number on the head is only a case of facilitating good launch profile. So don't worry about playing a 12-degree head if it launches well. Monty plays a 12-degree head, lofted down a little bit. Heck, he doesn't mind. It's just got to work. Size 58 shoes. Great handle that. Morning from New Zealand. Good morning. It will be morning for you actually. Wondering which of the new driver heads you've tested so far have been the most forgiving for a toe miss. Well, PXG, definitely very good for that. And you can, with their heads as well, you can put a bit more weight into the toe as well. So they've got a max model, which is certainly going to be good out the toe. I would say pings are always very good out the toe. You can move the heavier weight out to that toe side as well. Max K out the toe, very, very good. I would say the Callaways don't go anywhere near for a toe strike. That will knuckle spin off. The TaylorMade Core model, again, you can push weight out to the toe side, and they are way safer for spin out the toe than they have been. But I would probably say ping or the PXG for a toe strike. In terms of being safety net for spin, they've been very good indeed. James Ross, 720. What do you think of the theory that everyone should be trying to get as much help as possible? I'm a 9 handicap and use Apex CB tried the 440 iron and couldn't believe how easy it was to hit. There's always an argument for this. You know, the game's hard enough, why make it harder than it needs to be? There are some players, and I'm kind of one of them, I could play a more forgiving head than, you know, play 6 to pitch, I play them. No forgiveness whatsoever. But I've played blades from 46 on Wednesday. I've played blades for 33 years. So I'm probably desensitized to it a little bit, but I could play more forgiving. A major part in the enjoyment of the game is that sensation of strike and the feedback and kind of knowing that I got it right, for want of a better phrase. And for some players, that is actually more important than scoring. So there's a bit of a window to fit within. Yes, more forgiving heads are easier to hit. And if low scoring and getting away with a bit more is your sole focus, then yeah, you could definitely play more forgiving as long as it doesn't knuckle spin down and take flight off or give you potentially kind of the odd little flyer off the face. But you're using head style, or we'd be using head style in a fitting to manage forgiveness, launch angle, spin, strike point. So you know, something like an I-240 head, for example, gives you plenty of margin for error but keeps a bit of flight on. The G440 is much easier to hit but takes spin off. So there are lots of things that go into it. I have seen players that actually hit less forgiving heads better than more forgiving heads because of strike point, you know, higher strike point on the face, for example. There's a dead patch on forgiving heads where the weight's low. So it's definitely not black and white, but I think what's important to you from a playing point of view is it feel, feedback, is it just the enjoyment of getting that shot that you strike perfectly? Manage that with, you know, how regularly do you play, and do you need to make it that much harder for yourself? But through testing, you can determine what the best balance of everything is. But it is important to have forgiveness, but it's not everyone's most important factor, I would say. Mike T, can a forgiving driver have low spin and high ball speed? If so, which models? Well, I think we're seeing that this year. So, you know, that Cobra, the Optum X, that was pretty darn low spin. The PXG, the Tour Mid, pretty forgiving, pretty low spin. The 440K is not that high a spin anymore. GT2 isn't a particularly high spin head. So you can get quite a lot of forgiveness now. And with the head designs, we're seeing some low spins. So say this year more than any other, I mean, actually the Quantum Max is still pretty damn forgiving and pretty low spin. So I think this year more than any other, we're seeing heads that you can get both combinations, yes. Now we've got a couple more minutes, so I'm going to get through these as quickly as I can. Mike Bunn, currently game 225s, Mizuno 225s with Project X LS 6.0s. Like performance, but sometimes feel flight comes out flat, little too low. What shafts would you recommend to improve flight? And the follow-on is 10 handicapper, goodish ball striker. Thoughts on blended iron sets? I mean, shaft-wise is really about timing and quality of strike. So yes, the LS shafts aren't helping get any ball flight. And at 120 grams, you could probably get a little bit more flight out of, say, Modus 120X, Project X Red 120. In principle, they're designed to flight a bit more. But if you strike the Project X LS as well, then actually its head style and loft is going to give you ball flight. You know, add a couple of degrees of loft, you will pick up ball flight, you will pick up spin. So don't automatically go straight for the shaft. If you're swinging the well and timing the well and hitting them consistently, then maybe they are the best shaft for you, but use head style as well. And with regarding the split set, I think going 6 to 8 and then 9 and pitch, you can do that. I think a lot of heads now build in that kind of blend. Look at the current M15 and 13s. They're much sort of quieter profile heads than the short irons, and then they extend out the tech into the longer irons. You know, P770s do the same, T150s do the same. So some of that blend is already in there, so you might not necessarily need to until you get right to the top of the set, maybe a driving iron style top. So I wouldn't necessarily go looking for that if you don't have to. Craig T, how do you decide whether to use heavier wedge shafts or the same shaft using the irons? The answer is you test them. You know, generally, someone who is dead arm and more body rotation often stays in the same shaft. Someone who pulls on the handle and kind of sort of squeezes it a little bit more, you're generally going heavier. I would say 75% of players we go heavier, 25 stay the same, but again, it's all about delivery and timing and strike. Just find what works for you, and that is the right shaft. But if you're quieter hands, quieter arms, same shaft can often work, but say, try them. That's the best way to know. Kevin Phillips, what would lead you to fit someone into Project X LZ, and is it difficult to have weight and flex tied together? Project X LZ would be someone who needs a kind of mid to low balance point, fairly stable shaft, doesn't want it to feel harsh, so a bit more responsiveness than the standard Project X. But ultimately, what leads me to fit someone, if you need that kind of weight bracket, 115 to 125, need a bit of the bottom end to hit against, but want a bit of feedback, that kind of packages all of those up. Is it difficult to get weight and flex tied together? I'm not that worried about flex. So a lot of fitters are very, very focused on flex. I'm not. I'm more worried about, are you in control of the club head, and is everything arriving at the right time? Flex can't influence that. It just isn't possible for it to influence that in a major way. I fit to weight and timing, and then a Project X 5.5 to a 6.0 is 1 to 2% the bend of the shaft. It can't physically achieve anything at that level. So if it's that kind of minutiae, I'm really not worried about the flex. So we're going to get, we've got 3 or 4 left. I'm going to whip through these. Golf Nerd, built an indoor sim at home recently, looking for a high quality hitting surface. Have you tried the SIG Pro Softy or Fiber Built? Any recommendations? We haven't tried those simply because the Southwest surface, the Pro T, I think it's called, it's what Titleist uses at the TPI and has been a brilliant surface, and we've used that for several years now, and I've got no reason to change it, but there are some other good surfaces out there. What I like about that is you've got that much pile and then a little base, rather than that much rubber and a little bit of felt on the top. So it's quite protective from a joints point of view as well. And we get great consistent launch and spin off it. So that's why we haven't really gone looking for anything else. Shako, anything you can tell about the Titleist would release, spring release? It won't be spring. It'll be mid to second. It'll be Q3, I would have thought, but we'll start seeing timings probably April, May, I would have thought. Sally side, in the market for a new driver, would you still recommend the Titleist, especially after the price drop compared to all other new drivers? I would recommend the right head. Titleists are good. I don't mean to sound facetious saying that, but ultimately they are good, but it's still an expensive mistake if it's the wrong head for you, even if they've dropped price a little bit. They are great value now, but with the nuances, the fine nuances between the heads, I would always recommend trying them, test them, get fitted for them, and then you know you've got the right one, and then you're spending money well rather than guessing and potentially getting it wrong, and that's just a costly mistake. I'm going to do this, the last one, Eric, FT1. What's your sense of total club weight with a lighter shaft and heavier head versus heavier shaft with lighter swing weight? Does a player with a fast transition benefit more from one versus the other? Varies a little bit both ways. Ultimately, lighter, heavier head, you're only talking about a few grams, but it massively affects the balance and the timing. So you either are someone who needs the lighter club weight to get the club moving with you. So if you're somebody who has a bit more of a snap and an action, chances are heavy is just going to get dropped behind you. So and then you're using shaft weight to tie up the synchronization between body move, arms, and the base club, and then using head weight to fine tune release, but kind of the timing of when the head arrives at impact. That is what you're using the shaft and the head weight for, and one or other will suit, but head weight you only need to change a couple of grams and it has a massive effect. Shaft weight, you've got 70 odd grams worth or more, 100 grams worth of shaft weight that you can get close to changing in irons. So focus on base connection of player and club for shaft weight, head weight, little fine tune on impact timing and when it's arriving. If you get them both right, you get consistency, and you get both distance, directional consistency, efficient impact, and better golf all round. So I know I didn't quite get to the last couple of questions, so apologies for that. But fire them in. Drivers, Elite Standard Model No is the Elite Triple Diamond. Head weight without the screw was 193. Yeah, that was what we were hitting earlier. So thank you very much for all the questions. Great as ever. So grateful for you tuning in. And if you've enjoyed today and you aren't already subscribed, just click on the channel, subscribe. We've got a load of testing. I'm going to be doing a load of filming tomorrow, every Tuesday. Yeah, you keep me talking for an hour and 5 minutes straight without stopping. So thank you very much indeed. We've got the waste management this week, so I hope that goes well. See who wins out there. And then it's also Qatar on the DP World Tour. So a couple of interesting tournaments out in the desert there. Tune in next Monday. We'll have a little check on who's won there, and no doubt more insights from as we get to grips with the new heads that have just come in and can give you more insights as to what each of them's doing. So save those questions up for next week. I'll have someone else with me next week for sure, and we'll see you then. Have a great week. See you next Monday.